Good morning and welcome to the Liverpool Daily News. I'm James Martin. Today I'm joined by Emmet Gates. We have plenty to discuss, including the man who's been dubbed the Ukrainian Neymar and linked with Liverpool, and an interesting swap deal proposed involving Roberto Firmino. But we'll get to all of that in good time. First, Emmet, just a quick one to start us off. There's light at the end of the tunnel now, isn't there, in terms of the international break? We can officially now say Liverpool are back this week. How itchy are you to have Liverpool back in your life?
Funny, I was just saying to our editor, Matt Addison, that it feels like Liverpool haven't played a game of football in about 3 months. This feels like pre-season again. Obviously with the postponements, and then the international break. I feel like Liverpool have not played in a long, long time. So yeah, looking forward to club football coming back and Liverpool back in action, finally.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like almost 3 months. I think it's actually been almost 1 month, which is pretty remarkable, certainly since we played in the Premier League. Yes, so how that will affect the players, time will tell. Hopefully the break has done a few people good. You never quite know with these things. It looks as though Trent Alexander-Arnold might be missing out on this next England squad as well. So at least they no risk of injury, but a continuously baffling situation. But anyway, let us know in the comments what you think of that, what you think of what we'll be talking about today. We always love hearing from you, and we'll discuss any relevant comments that come up. But we'll start with this news about Roberto Firmino. Intriguing story. He's been more involved maybe than we might have expected this season. But according to the report, anyway, Liverpool would be willing to consider a swap deal in January involving Memphis Depay from Barcelona. What do you make of that, Emmet?
Yeah, I mean it's an odd one, really. I mean, as you said, Firmino was started more regularly at the beginning of the season than probably most of us would have anticipated. But obviously, I think that's due to Darwin Nunez, being suspended for 3 games after getting his red card against Crystal Palace, and Diogo Jota obviously being injured. And Firmino really hasn't done a whole lot. I mean, there's been some nice touches, some Firmino-esque bits of play, but I think we can all kind of agree at this point that his best years are behind him. And the link with Memphis Depay is interesting, because Depay was very close to joining Juventus in the summer, but that deal fell through, and so he ended up staying at Barcelona. Where, as far as I know, he hasn't really received any minutes, or if he has, there hasn't been a lot. Obviously, with Lewandowski there, and Lewandowski doing what Lewandowski does and scoring goals. So, yeah, I mean, Memphis Depay, he's not really going to play much at Barcelona. I mean, bear in mind, is he really going to play that much at Liverpool either? You'd imagine by come January time, Nunez will find his feet and click into gear, and Jota will be back. So, from both players' perspective, I don't really know if it makes any sense, because I can't see Firmino really getting more game time in Spain than he is now with Liverpool. But in saying that, the less physical side of La Liga might appeal to 2022 Firmino rather than staying in the Premier League. So it might be easier on his body, maybe. But yeah, from a perspective of both players, I don't really know if a swap benefits anyone really, because they're kind of, Depay is on the margins at Barcelona. Firmino probably will be once Jota and Nunez, come back. So yeah, I don't really know. But I mean, if it's one of those where Firmino only has 6 months left, likely Liverpool aren't going to renew his deal. So it's kind of a low cost gamble. Maybe it could work. It might not work. If it doesn't work, there's no big loss really financial wise. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and one probably I'd say both of us never expected to see on a website or a newspaper. The fact that these two have been linked together with a swap. So yeah, it makes an interesting one. Slightly bizarre, but yeah, I mean, to me it could be a low cost gamble. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I know what you mean in terms of it does seem like one which doesn't really seem to make sense for any of the involved parties. Because if Liverpool want that kind of fringe player who can come in and do a job on occasion, then it seems like they already have that in Firmino. And if they're that worried about losing that kind of role of player within the squad, would you not just renew the man who knows the system? I mean, Depay is a little bit younger, but he's not in his prime. Well, he's maybe just on the edge of his prime. I think he's 28, but before long he'll be in exactly the same position as Firmino's in now. And yeah, like you say, I'm not exactly sure what Barcelona are planning to do with Firmino either, given that, as you say, Lewandowski seems to have the actual striker berth nailed down. So, yeah, and if they want to move him into midfield, you'd think they'd sign a specialist midfielder. So, yeah, it's very odd, very odd. Lots of comments essentially agreeing that it seems like a bizarre deal. Couple of Depay's not better than Origi, says Bearden. I think Depay might beg to differ, but the fact is he'd be coming into a similar squad role in terms of the minutes he would get. Liverpool let Origi go this summer, seemingly thinking that they had things covered. So, yeah, I mean, it's a strange one. It is a strange one, but we'll move on to like I say, the man dubbed the Ukrainian Neymar, Mykhaylo Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk.
Good pronunciation there, James. Good pronunciation.
Thank you.
I'm not even going to try and pronounce it.
Tallest 93 says, I'd take the Ukrainian Neymar and Caicedo or João Gomez in January, though that's a must. So that's quite the shopping list. But we'll focus on Mudryk for the time being. He's really sort of blossomed onto the European consciousness this season, hasn't he, Emmet, with his Champions League performances?
Yeah, to be honest, I had never heard of him until I think, was it Chelsea or Arsenal tried to put in a huge bid for him at the very tail end of the summer transfer window, and obviously he stayed where he was at Shakhtar. And I've been impressed with the bits I've seen of him in the Champions League. And I was reading that he said it is his dream to play in the Premier League one day. But he also said that he gave me the impression that he's in no rush. He talks about he's only at 20% of his potential, which is a bit frightening, considering how well he started in the Champions League. And you do imagine there's going to be a long queue banging at Shakhtar's door trying to bring him, to Western Europe. But he does look a player, to be fair. And Shakhtar generally always unearth, a dazzling winger every 2 or 3 years. If you think back to Douglas Costa, like 6-7 years ago, they always see, every couple of years they go through a cycle of players, and they always just this always seems to be wingers, usually Brazilian. So, even though he's not Brazilian this time, but Shakhtar just seem to have a way with exciting wingers, young wingers. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he develops over the next, 3-4 months. And you do imagine, given, Shakhtar's unfortunate position, with events happening in Ukraine, that they may be forced to sell him in January. Probably against his own will, he would maybe like another full season in Ukraine. But it'd be interesting to see how he develops and where he goes. And I do think Liverpool maybe should be monitoring his situation, keeping an eye on it, and see how he develops. But you would imagine a hefty fee would be involved to bring him over to the West.
Yeah, a tricky situation for Shakhtar. For all involved, really. But there was a FIFA ruling in the summer about letting players who were contracted there leave. Shakhtar felt they missed out on a lot of potential transfer fees because of that. Of course, it's such a no-win situation, but certainly they will be looking for some kind of windfall to sort of offset that, and maybe Mudryk is the answer there. I suppose the interesting thing for Liverpool is that he is doing well in the Champions League at the minute. That does tend to be a key consideration, particularly when signing from potentially these lesser leagues. If players have shown they can do it in the Champions League, that maybe gives Liverpool a little bit more confidence in their recruitment, would you say?
Yeah, I think, the Champions League is always the barometer, especially if a player isn't in one of the top 5 leagues, shall we say. I think there always tends to be a bit of even within that, there is still a bit of bias towards, certain leagues. We always see the French league been dubbed a farmers league. So even within the Western Europe sphere, there are certain leagues where, there is a bit of bias. And then that's even, multiple exacerbated when you're talking about Eastern Europe. It's like, oh, well, it's the Ukrainian league, blah, blah, blah. But if they do well in the Champions League, that generally tends to be the barometer of, okay, right, this lad's a player. we'll keep an eye on him. We'll see how he develops. And the fact that he's done so well so far in the first 2 games, it definitely does scream that there is a talent there. It's just, I think it's a case of just seeing how he plays. It's looking like Shakhtar, could progress from their group. So he definitely could get, an extra 4, 5, 6 games in this season's Champions League. And if he does well in those, then that'll definitely put him in the shop window. I mean, he's already in the shop window, but it'll further, boost his profile, and it'll bring in more money for Shakhtar. So yeah, the Champions League is always a barometer of how good a player can be or will be. So yeah, I mean, he's did really well so far. Not that I've seen a whole lot of him in the Champions League, because I don't think a lot of us are racing out to watch Shakhtar, to be honest. But from the highlights I've seen, he does look a real player.
Maybe a few more will be rushing to watch them after the latest links. But yeah, I suppose we saw that with Darwin Núñez as well, didn't we? That kind of the faith the Champions League instilled in the club to go out and potentially break the transfer record, which lets us circle back around nicely to one more thing before we finish, sort of linking back to what we were talking about with Firmino earlier. Neil Strangleman says, if you don't play Firmino, he's not going to show you his previous form. He's underrated being great for the club, and Núñez still needs to prove himself. He could have value in other positions in the club. So do you think there's an element of that? Do you think Firmino's sort of decline has been kind of overstated just by virtue of the fact that others have overtaken him in the pecking order? Do you think a run of games would sort of revive the Firmino of old, or do you think that his time has probably come to an end?
I mean, it's a tricky one. Like last season was difficult for him. I mean, last season his season really never got going, because he came back late from the Copa America, if you remember, and then he was just injured the whole season. It seemed like he was always out for long stretches. He would come back, play a couple of games off the bench, and then he was out again. So I don't know if the continuous injuries that he had last season has kind of affected him and kind of just took a couple of yards of pace off Firmino. I mean, Firmino was never a player that was really about pace. His greatest attribute was his brain, his football intelligence. So, I mean, that's something you never really lose, even if your body starts to give up on you. The first 2 or 3 yards are in your head. So, when you look back at the opening day of the season, he started against Fulham and he wasn't great. And Núñez came on and Liverpool looked a much better team. And in saying that, in the next game, Núñez really didn't look that good against Crystal Palace, got sent off, obviously. So I don't think we should write Firmino off just yet. You probably do need to give him a string of games, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 games, to see if there is a real decline, or it's just unfortunate, or he needs a run of games to get back into form. So, I mean, it is a tough one, but in saying that, he is running out of contract at the end of the season. So can you really afford to can you afford to bench Núñez, who's a big money signing, to keep playing Firmino, who is likely going to leave at the end of the season? I think we're going to see Firmino just start a game here, start a game there, but he's not going to get a continuous run. Like we saw with Luis Diaz in the second half of last season, whose impact was so good that Klopp shifted Mane into the middle and give Diaz essentially the keys to the left-hand side, and he got game after game. I don't think we're going to see that with Firmino this season, just because he's going to probably leave, next summer. So it's a tricky one. But personally, for me, I do think he's lost a yard. But again, he's never a player that needed that pace like Salah, like Mane. He was always the most intelligent of the three for me. But yeah, it's a tricky one, because, I mean, do you bench Núñez and keep him on the bench just to get Firmino into a bit of form? Not with the money that Liverpool have paid for Núñez. So yeah, I think it's more of keep Firmino on the bench and give him the odd start here or there.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. Like you said, I think we all kind of felt that Firmino would be the most kind of timeless one. He did seem like the one who could keep going and play similarly well into his 30s. But yeah, it's odd. Some of the things, like you say, you wouldn't have thought that would have faded do seem to be less kind of reliable than they once were. Maybe that is a case of the fact that he's in and out of the team now. He hasn't got that rhythm, but things like his touch, I mean, sometimes he gives you reminders of exactly what he can do and still does mesmerizing things with the ball. But occasionally the ball will be, coming into his feet and the first touch will be lacking, which a few years ago you just wouldn't have been able to fathom. But I think Clinton is right to say he's okay for backup. I think he's more than okay for backup for the time being. He's still an exceptional player. But yeah, like you say, it's I think Luis Diaz is probably the blueprint in terms of succession planning, and you'd have to assume that is the plan with Darwin Núñez going forward as well. So, I mean, all good things come to an end, and so too does this morning's stream. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to keep up with all of our content today over on Liverpool.com and on the Blood Red YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow with all of the latest Liverpool news. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching.